We're going to jump right into installing a Facebook pixel in Shopify in 2021. Shopify and Facebook keep changing how it's done, and I keep updating my tutorials. So we're going to go to Facebook, and then there's a number of ways to get to Business Manager. Usually I'll just click on Ads. If you don't have it set up already, you're going to want to set up an account with Business Manager. It's free, it's really easy to install, and you get like extra tracking and features, and you can share it with other people and things like that. So I'm going to have a card pop up if you don't already have a Business Manager. All right, so we're under Business Settings, and you can just click these 9 dots for Business Tools, and then go to Business Settings. That's where we're going to be able to find the pixels. You may just have the one in here, but definitely select a Business Manager. All right, so we want to scroll down and go to Pixels. And if you have a brand new account, you probably won't see anything here. So if you're creating a brand new one, you can do Add. I will show you how to finish setting up a pixel or to move it from one to the other really briefly in a second. So you want to be able to find this later, so we can just give it the name of the brand we're connecting it to. And if you aren't certain if you've already connected it to something already, you can punch in the website. Otherwise, just leave that. So if you're setting up a brand new pixel, you can just do continue. If you already created a pixel and want to finish setting it up, you can see this pixel hasn't been finished being set up. So we can just go to Open an Events Manager and click continue, and that'll take you to this exact same step. Or if you have a pixel that's like installed, you can remove that installation, and under Open an Events Manager, you can actually install it from a new website and go to the next step there. So that's 3 different ways to do it. But in this example, let's say we're creating this one for the very first time. And you'll want to do set up the pixel now. And there's a number of ways you can do it. We are going to add the code using a partner integration. And we'll scroll down to Shopify. Okay, so now they don't really help you out a whole lot. So we are going to go into Shopify. I'm just going to log in. Okay, and we'll want to go to, you'll likely have a Facebook here. If you don't have Facebook already, you can go right here and add the sales channel and look for the Facebook one. And once that's set, you can go to Facebook. It's under your sales channels. All right, and you want to go to the bottom one, which is create free and paid ads on Facebook. These are more on creating like the whole store under Shopify. So we're just going to want to connect it, and you will connect your account. Punch in your password. Continue as yourself. Awesome. Cool. All right, so this is where we're going to want to connect the Business Manager. So you want to make sure you connect the right one, because the one that actually has the pixels. So we're going to connect that. You want to make sure you connect the right page as well, and the right ad account. So those should all be connected together. I go through that in my tutorial. Under data sharing, I generally do maximum. You know, you just get the most tracking and things like that. So do maximum. And then it says behavior will be tracked with this pixel. We're going to click disconnect because we want to select just the right pixel. And right here, we have Willie's Pies. Now, if you just created it, you may have to like refresh or wait a little bit. But if you're seeing it in your Facebook Manager and you're under the right ad account, it should eventually pop up for you. Then we're going to click connect and then confirm. You'll then need to set the target country and actually accept the terms and conditions. Okay, cool. Now it is actually set up. It should be working. If you ever want to change this or double check your work, you can go under settings and make sure it's, the right Facebook ad account, the right business manager, Facebook page, and then the pixel you'll find under data sharing settings. And if you're not seeing it, you can refresh it or check your accounts to make sure you have the right business manager, Facebook page, etc. So now that is set up and in there. Okay, so we're going to say I've completed the Shopify setup. And then we are actually going to grab the URL from our site and paste it in here to send test traffic. So you can just grab it from the top up there and punch it in and do send test traffic. This is just a test site for tutorials, but we're going to see if it moves to active. Now, some people have run into an issue where it kind of stays red for a little bit, and sometimes you just have to refresh it. You can try a different browser or just make sure things are set up right in Shopify. Sometimes it's a little annoying where it doesn't go through that step and you have to just keep trying at it. So we're going to do continue and setup complete. So you can see that it is showing up green, it is connected. It can take a little bit of time for it to start receiving events. You'll definitely want to set up events and custom conversions, so let's jump into that right now. There is a misconception, and that's that you need to set up these events or conversions or things like that in order to track the different page views and track where people are going or actually show it to people who visit specific pages. You actually can do all of that right out of the gate, and I'll show you. So if we open in analytics, this is one I haven't set anything up. We actually can see exactly how many users, the user's activity, and if we scroll down, you can see, hey, here's how many people visit each URL. And you can also send ads just to people who, let's say, have visited this specific URL. Okay, so we don't need it for tracking. What are these actually for? So it already knows the pages that people are visiting, but we need to set it up so it's actually tracking, okay, when people hit this page or take this action, that means that they made a purchase. In this example, we'll say we're tracking purchases. Over time, it'll get really, really good at finding those purchases, people who hit that specific purchase page. And then we can actually later on create things like lookalikes of like, hey, find other people who are very, very similar to people who made purchases or made big purchases or frequent buyers or anything like that. So it's so key to have this set up correctly. I'm going to go into the pixel on my other website because I already have pages for that created. So let's go to open an event manager. Now, I do want to mention I do have a full 2-hour training that takes you from beginner to expert at Facebook ads. I'll have a card for that pop up right up there, and I'll have a link to that at the end because you do want to set this up properly before you jump into learning more about Facebook ads. Let me clear up some confusion on events versus custom conversions and when you should use each one. So whether you're setting up either, basically you're saying, okay, here's this action that I want people to take. And I want you to find people who are going to take this exact action and get better and better at finding similar people who are really, really likely to take this exact action. Okay, so let's say you sell granola bars. You may have different variations, different flavors, a 6-pack, a 20-pack, things like that. But you have that one core audience that's really interested in buying granola bars. It's a similar audience. So with a lot of people, you can just set up a purchase event for anyone who buys these, anyone who hits the thank you page, because then when it goes to find other people who also make purchases, it'll find people similar to the people who bought. So it's really, really good that that's just set up as a general purchase event. The bigger that audience is, the better it is at optimizing things. But if you have very different products or things like that, let's say you add Scooby gear or something like that, then when you're doing future ads, those audiences are very, very different. It can be a very different price point, very different product, very different audience. All of a sudden it's going to get really confusing because it's going to try to optimize for purchases in the same way it did with granola bars Or, if you create a lookalike of, hey, create an audience similar to people who made a purchase, the granola bar people are going to be vastly different than the scuba diving people. So in this point, you can actually create a custom conversion, which is basically like, okay, here's an audience of just people who buy high-end scuba gear. Like, that's what we're tracking. So these things are separate so that the granola bar, it can just optimize for people who buy granola bars, and then you have the separate custom conversion over here that is tracking, the people who want to buy scuba gear. And that way both of them can optimize separately. So that's when you want to actually start to use custom conversions. So your audience could be entrepreneurs, but you have one $5 course aimed at people who are just starting off, and then a $1,000 course aimed at people who are really successful and have been in business for years and years. Well, those are very different products aimed at very different people, very different price points. So you'd probably want to make one like a purchase thing, but you'd want a custom conversion, let's say for the $1,000 course. So back to the granola bar example, even if I added some products, if they're a pretty similar audience, a pretty similar price point, like protein bars or granola you can take home, I would still just put those all under the purchase events. Those wouldn't be different enough that I want like a separate custom conversion. It would only be if something was for a very different audience or very different price point that I'd introduce those custom conversions. So we're gonna wanna go to the event setup. And there's a couple different ways you can get there, but I find you can just go to settings. So we want to scroll down to open event setup tool. Now you can have it track events automatically where it's trying to figure out where purchases are and use button text and URLs to figure that out. And it does a pretty good job if you turn that on, but I really want to make sure that every event is perfectly set up, that is tracking everything correctly, that it's not tracking a button click when I want to do a URL. So I always set up the most important pages, especially like the purchase, manually. So you'll actually grab the code from the page you're setting up the events for, whether you're doing the button clicks or the URL. Okay, so give it a second. The Facebook event setup tool should show up. If it isn't showing up, try turning off ad blocker or using a different browser. So you can see events on the page or all the events that you can choose from. And you could track a button click or track this URL where the event fires when people land on this page or when they click a specific button on this page. Now I'll show you, we'll go down to the checkout. So an issue that people run into is if they're making a purchase, a lot of people will say, hey, track this button. If people click yes, register that as a purchase. Now you don't want to do that because here's the issue. If I click that button right now, I haven't clicked this box. Maybe I entered a number wrong. Maybe I didn't fill out things correctly. Maybe the page is not loading properly. It can track that button click as a purchase, whereas they didn't fill things out correctly and a purchase was never made. So for purchase, I want to actually go to the thank you page that people hit after their purchase has successfully gone through and track that as a purchase event. Now I have this set up in an interesting way where if people click the button and show that intent, it goes down to like where they can initiate the checkout. Initiate checkout is very similar to add to cart. A lot of times there'll be a big storefront like Amazon where you can keep adding things to your cart. And then once you actually go to checkout with that cart, that's when you want to use the initiate checkout, generally on the checkout page itself. But I'm going to track a new button. And I have this button right here for join the challenge now, which kind of starts that checkout. So you'll just select the event and choose initiate checkout. So this button and checkout process doesn't have a precise value because people can add additional things to their cart later. So I'm going to not include value and grab it from the purchase itself, but you will want to choose the value on the page if you have an exact cart value that you can track. click confirm, and you can see it popped up right there where that's being tracked on your site. And it's pretty intelligent. You can see that I actually added it to all of those buttons because they have the same text that it said. If the button text is join the challenge, add the initiate checkout. So you can add new ones, but that's all I want to track on this page. So go to finish setup. So I had to refresh the page and wait for a couple minutes, but now you can see that we have the initiate checkout here. You should look for it receiving events in the future. It depends on the amount of traffic. You can go there yourself and actually go to that page or click buttons or things like that. There's usually just a delay, and you can actually see at any point in the future. You can manage the event and see like where it's set up and what triggers that event. So now we want to set up purchases, and we're going to want to do that on the thank you page, the page that people hit after they've finished completing their purchase. So we're going to again go to open event setup tool, and we're going to want to put in that thank you URL. So hopefully you'll have the price that they paid. On this one, it's just like a fixed price, so I just had text, but you can have like a dynamic thing like here's your receipt or your order or things like that. We are going to want to go to track a URL and go to purchase, and then you have different options. So it will be tracking that user, and it can see what their value was from initiate checkout. Usually anytime I can put the value on the page, I find that just works really, really well. So sometimes it'll update like dynamically or things like that. But if we select this, it's actually going to be pulling in the numerical value. So it's going to be tracking a purchase of $27 when they land on this page. And that would really be the only time that they would land on this page. I have a page where I could send people back to access these two versions, but that's a completely separate page because I don't want when people click that on the email list it to track it as a purchase, because it is not. You also have the option, you can do URL equals or URL contains. So you could, let's say, only have the word thank you in all of your pages after people make a purchase. So you could add that for all of them in bulk, but usually I just like to be meticulous and go through page by page and make sure every single purchase page is set up correctly. So we'll click confirm, and then you can do finish setup and finish. Skip that. Now we're back to the pixel. And you can see now we have purchases active. We've also received 2 total events for initiate checkout since we set that up 26 minutes ago. So, especially if you're sending traffic to any ad campaign, you want to make sure that the add to cart, lead, initiate checkout, and in particular purchases is set up correctly. It's at the right URL. That is so incredibly important. So 90% of you can just use the events to set everything up, but if you do have those unique audiences or products where you really want to optimize specifically for just that thing, let's jump into setting up custom conversions. Now with the events, we just selected our pixel and made the events for it. Custom conversions, you can create it, just create them and then assign them to a specific pixel. All right, so I'm going to call this high ticket. And in this example, let's say I've got $7 courses, but now I want to launch a $1,000 course, which is going to be a very different customer, very different audience, very different thing to optimize for. So you can do a description if you want, but you want to make sure it's got the right pixel selected. Since for this one, we'll just be tracking a very specific URL, you can do all URL traffic, and then you're doing URL contains as part of the rule. So you can just do a part of that URL. I typically do it without the HTTPS or like a backslash. And You can enter a conversion value, that's not necessary. So you can do this for purchases, you can do it for collecting leads or things like that. So I'm going to click create. And it will show inactive at the start just because it hasn't got many people hitting that. You can refresh it, but sometimes you'll just have to wait for a little bit. Connect it with the pixel, but you also want to connect it with your ads manager. So what you want to do is you can just click share, and then under custom conversions, you have it here, but under connected assets, you can actually add your ad account. And now when you're in your ads manager, you can actually connect to that. Okay, so now let's say we're running ads. We've got everything connected. We've got the events on the right page. Sometimes you need to wait for a while for it to actually turn green or to get the right events. But now what we can do is we'll want to select conversions and click continue. And then it's like, okay, what do you want it to optimize for? What do you want to try to get people to do? Well, if we select the pixel, lead, that didn't used to be there. That's something we added as an event. And then high ticket is a custom conversion that we just did. So now it's going to track how many people actually hit that page. It's going to optimize for people getting to that thank you page for that high ticket product. Or, if we do lead, every page that we have listed as a lead, every page that the event is set up as a lead, it's going to count as a lead and it's going to optimize for that. So it'll be looking at, okay, of the people we showed it to who clicked on it, how many of them became a lead? How many made a purchase? How much was that purchase for? So it'll try to optimize for that. So for example, you could send them to a page with a product, but then they go to the home page and purchase something else. If you're just doing purchase, it would track that as an actual purchase because it's people who they showed the ad to who ended up in the purchase category. Whereas if it was, a custom conversion, one specific product, then if you sent people to that product page, they ended up at the home page, they got something else, it wouldn't track that as that high ticket custom conversion. Do you really want to be insanely good at Facebook ads? I put together a full 2-hour Facebook ad training, which goes through everything on creating campaigns, setting things up, copywriting, all of that. The link to that is right up there. You definitely don't want to miss it. If you've already seen that one, you can check out the link right over there or my ebook on optimizing Facebook ad campaigns. So hopefully I'll see you in that longer training.